everyone, I'm Noemi from tuamigaenlacocina.com, and today I will show you my authentic Mexican rice recipe. In the first part of this video, I will show you exactly how I prepare and cook my Mexican rice. And in the second part of this video, I will share some tips and tricks so you can master this recipe if you are looking to make the most popular and iconic rice in Mexico. Let's get started. Let me show you how I do it. And for this recipe, we are going to need a cup of long grain white rice and a third of a cup of cooking oil. And for the tomato broth, we are going to need 2 cups of chicken broth, 3 medium tomatoes, a half of a medium white onion, a large garlic clove, and tomato or chicken bouillon. And I normally chop the tomatoes and onions just to make it easier for my blender. And the first thing we want to do is to make the tomato broth by blending all of the ingredients, including the 2 cups of chicken broth, onions and tomatoes, garlic clove, and our secret ingredient, the tomato bouillon, for extra color and flavor. And we simply blend until smooth consistency, and then we strain the sauce for a clean broth. And here we have about 3 cups of tomato broth to make this Mexican rice. Next, I prepare my veggies. We need about a half of a fresh medium potato chopped into cubes, and about a cup of frozen mixed vegetables. Once I have these ingredients ready, I put them aside for a moment. And then, in a large non-stick pot, I heat up the oil for about 5 minutes over medium heat before adding the rice. And then I toast the rice until lightly brown, and I stir gently, making sure it gets evenly toasted. Once the rice looks evenly golden brown, I add the tomato broth. Also at this point, I add the potatoes and the mixed frozen veggies and more salt if needed. And then I cover the pot with a glass lid. I place it on a medium burner over low heat, making sure the pot is centered, and then immediately I set the timer for 25 minutes. And now we simply allow it to cook over low heat. After the 25 minutes, I reduce the heat a little bit more, and I set the timer for 10 more minutes. After the 10 minutes, I simply turn it off, and I don't remove the lid for at least 20 minutes. And there you have it, a gorgeous, fluffy, and delicious Mexican rice with vegetables. And now, I will share some of my tips and tricks to make the perfect Mexican rice. And the first thing I want to mention is that to make this Mexican rice recipe, I use a 250 milliliters measuring cup to measure my cup of rice, which is exactly 7 ounces of rice. Also, to get the best rice texture, make sure to cook good rice. You can tell the rice is in good condition when most of the grains remain intact and not broken into small pieces. Another thing that I like to mention is that for this recipe, we don't rinse the rice. You just want to make sure to get good clean rice from good rice brands in which they often do not require rinsing the rice before cooking. Here we have 3 samples of cooked rice, all of them from the same bag of rice, but I rinsed some of them before I cooked them to show you the difference. The rice on the left, I rinsed it for longer time and I let it dry for 24 hours. Some of the grains got broken and the end result was mushy rice. And the rice in the middle, I rinsed it once and quickly. And I let it dry for about 30 minutes before I toasted it. It turned out okay, not great, but good enough. And the one on the right, I didn't rinse it at all, and the end result was great. So for this recipe, it's best if you don't rinse the rice, and since we toast the rice in hot oil, it's not going to be starchy or sticky. For this recipe, we want to use plenty of oil to make sure the rice gets nicely coated, and also we want to make sure to preheat it on a medium heat before we add the rice. But if a third of a cup is a little bit too much for your taste, you can either drain the excess oil before you adding the tomato broth, or you can use a quarter cup of oil instead. But make sure to preheat the oil for a few minutes before you add the rice to toast it. If you preheat the oil, the rice will take about 5 minutes to get the perfect light golden brown. But you will need to stir gently and only as often as needed. So, if you are making this recipe, you will need 3 cups of tomato broth for 1 cup of long grain white rice. Normally the rule for 1 cup of rice recipe, you need to add 2 cups of liquid. But for any Mexican rice recipe, you will need to add, along with the 2 cups of liquid, other ingredients such as tomatoes, onions, and garlic. And the result, after blending all of the ingredients together, is a little bit more than 3 cups of liquid. And I normally use 3 1/4 cups of tomato broth because I love to have extra moist rice. Another thing I would like to mention is that we do want a clean tomato broth without tomato seeds or skin. So I recommend to strain the tomato broth if you have a standard blender like this one, and only use the 24 ounces of that broth to make this recipe. Also for this recipe, it's very important to have the tomato broth and the mixed veggies ready before the cooking process. So to keep them fresh, you can add some water to the potatoes and reserve the mixed veggies in the freezer until we need them. And try not to use veggies out of the can. They don't taste great in the rice, and you don't want mushy vegetables. As soon the rice gets nicely toasted, we want to add the tomato broth and the mixed veggies into the pot together with the rice to prevent over toasting or to prevent burning the rice by leaving it on the heat too long. And you might want to reduce the heat while we add the rest of the ingredients to stop the cooking process just for a little bit. And it's very important to set the timer if you want to know when the rice is ready. But most importantly is to prevent burning the rice by overcooking it or have uncooked rice by not letting it cook enough. For this recipe, first we need to set the stove on a low heat, which is the number 3 on my stove from 1 to 10, and simply allow to cook for 25 minutes. During the first 25 minutes, the rice will start to simmer and it should absorb most of the liquid. After that, we need to reduce the heat just a little bit more, which is on the number 2 on my stove, and set the timer for 10 more minutes. In these 10 minutes, the rice will steam until it gets fully cooked, and it should absorb the rest of the liquid as well. after the 10 minutes, we will turn it off, but you don't want to remove the lid because at this point, the rice is not ready yet. The rice will continue cooking with its own steam and will get fully cooked and fluffy and absorb some of the liquid that might have been left behind. We must let it rest for at least 20 minutes if you are looking for a delicious, perfect, and fluffy rice. Sometimes you might want to mix in a thin layer of tomato paste left on top of the rice before serving the rice to your family. So you can mix it with a fork gently, just a little, but make sure to mix it after letting it rest for 20 minutes. We should also be aware that some rice may take longer to cook, and therefore we should make a small adjustment in the cooking time. So if this is your first time cooking my recipe, or you are cooking this Mexican rice with a different brand of rice than the one you are familiar with, it is possible that you have to make a little adjustment to the cooking process. So here I will explain how I do it. So if at the end of the first 25 minutes of the cooking time, you realize that the rice has not absorbed most of the liquid and there is still too much liquid above the rice, you will need to reduce the heat exactly as in this recipe and continue cooking the rice on the lowest heat. But instead of cooking for 10 minutes, you will let it cook for 15 to 20 minutes. So basically, you will add 5 to 10 minutes more to the last 10 minutes of the cooking time that I originally mentioned for this recipe. And after that, we simply continue with the next step, which is turning off the heat and let it rest for about 20 minutes. Using this method, you will figure out how long it will take to cook your Mexican rice. So next time, you will know exactly how long to let it simmer. There are so many Mexican rice recipes out there, and I want to thank you for letting me share mine with you today. I hope you find useful some of the tips and tricks in this video. Thank you again, and I'll see you in the next one.